Hello, and welcome to Step Up Nigeria's podcast. Our podcast is an initiative built to create awareness of governance issues that highlight the cost of corruption and its impact on service delivery. Our podcast is also aimed at promoting values that will help to build a society of people with integrity and provide solutions to service delivery challenges faced by everyday Nigerians. My name is Oluwafermi Iyoda, and I am the host of this podcast. On our podcast today, we're going to be discussing something very interesting. We're discussing how the cost of elections fuels corruptions in Nigeria. And we have two anti-corruption experts on our call today to have this conversation. Expensive elections in a nation where 70.8% of her people are living below $1 per day and 92% on less than $2 a day is a major source of corruption. The 2023 general elections are only 10 months away, and in the last 3 months, many political aspirants have declared for various public offices, most prized of all, the office of the president. Now, think about it. From the ADC's 500,000 naira tickets for the state assemblies to the 100 million naira presidential ticket of the APC and the ongoing bribing of delegates that's happening in the country, it is clear that good, hardworking Nigerian citizens will never be able to gain these slots for public office, and that those who are able to pay for these forms have arrived at them through illicit means. Political parties have fixed fees higher than what the aspirants would earn as their legitimate salaries and allowances throughout their 4-year term in offices that they are gunning for. So how do they pay for these forms? What can be done about this? Find out more as you listen to today's episode. Today on my podcast, I have two guests with me. Both of my guests combined have an anti-corruption experience of about 30 years, so they know what they're talking about in this conversation today. My first guest is someone who you're very familiar with. She's the executive director for Step Up Nigeria, Mrs. Onyinye. And I also have a board member for Step Up Nigeria, who is also the country office partnership lead for the United Nations in South Sudan, in the person of Ms. Ekanem, Bassey. So thank you, Ma. Thank you, Oyi. Thank you both for joining me this morning. I think we should just get right into the conversation. So I'd like to ask, how would you say the cost of elections fuels corruption in Nigeria? And I'd like Mrs. Ekanem to go first, please.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt in Nigeria that elections are really linked to the high prevalence of corruption in Nigeria, just the cost of elections. If we even look at the official cost of elections, in the last general elections, which was 2015, INEC said they spent about 242 billion on just the elections. And we are not talking about what the individual candidates spent, the parties themselves spent. And their proposals now within the legislature is for 305 billion. So there's even an increase for the elections. So elections are really expensive ventures in Nigeria. Nigeria elections are even more expensive than the biggest democracy, which is India. India has about 6 times the population of Nigeria, and we are outspending them. And so, and Nigeria is also said to have the world's collection of poorest people. About 70% of Nigerians are living below $1 a day. And so when you, for instance, put a presidential form for 100 million, and a president in Nigeria earns about not up to 1 point something million monthly. But even just the expression of interest, the nomination form comes to 100 million, which is about $250,000. You can clearly see that there's not a correlation between what people are going to be spending, and that's just the form. There are adverts, campaigns, consultations. So you can just imagine what a candidate spends. And then, so you beg the question, is elections, is it really about public service, or is it an investment to recoup your finance? And the attitude that we've seen from most politicians is that it's a financial venture. People, even the president his first election said that he got a loan to buy the form. And so when you get a loan, a commercial loan to buy a form to go into life of service, how do you recoup it back? And so all the monies that candidates are spending for elections, really, now we are going into billions, just to go into office, supposedly for a life of service. They will have to recoup this money back. We can see that there's no honest means of really recouping this money back. They will even go into a lot of kinds of compromises into, people take a look at just the structure, the economy, and they start making compromises, make promises, not only for political positions, in terms of concessions on services that the country should be making. So in a way, states, the nation is mortgaged right from the election point. And I say that how a government will perform, just look at some of the how much people are spending, some of the conversations they are having, the relationships, the concessions. It's like horse trading. Many times they go into office and their hands are bound. Many of them don't even really have any choice but to do recoup the investment that they themselves, not personally, but also people made on their behalf. So it's not about finance. It's now about how do we recoup for this and also prepare for the next elections, right? Someone funded your elections, you are going to empty the state coffers. So I think there is that link with how expensive our formal and also even just the electionary process is, with the high rate of corruption that you have in Nigeria. If your salary is so low and you are supposed to be really sustaining yourself on your salary, and even the formal requirements are so high, you are going to have to think about illegal ways of recouping some of the things that you do. So elections is an investment for people for pecuniary measures. That's just my take on elections in Nigeria.
Thank you very much for that response, Ma. I think for a lot of young people as well, the question for us is, how do these many people have 100 million naira to pay for forms? So next, I'd like Oni to please give us her comments on how she thinks, elections have fueled the cost of food corruption in Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you, Farami, and thank you, Ekanem. Like Ekanem actually said it. I like the fact what Ekanem said about mortgaging, like it's some sort of like, because when you think about the fact that I think the focus, like literally you can see is obvious with the number of presidential declarations that become a joke now, and everybody, saying either somebody has bought a form for them or whatever. It just tells you, like, it's a joke, because how many people, I think somebody said about 23 at the last count. I don't know if there are more. So, and this is about 100 million per form. Do you get what I mean? And if you think about, if we say the cost of building a hospital, it's about, they said a standard hospital about 20 million naira. You know what I mean? So imagine someone 100 million could build 5 hospitals. And that's the way I see this thing. So, and it also takes away, we don't hear the sort of like campaigning, because nobody's really campaigning on solid things. There's not that conversation is not happening. All we're having is people saying, I declare my race, vote for me, if you know what I mean. And the focus is really on how they're going to get. And that money, that's just one aspect of the cost. So we're talking about the forms. But there's also the vote buying that happens at the primaries, and there's also the ones that happen, of course, at the grassroots, because, there are different levels of vote buying. And so, as Ekanem said, when they come back to, come into power, of course, what do you think is going to happen? Is it going to be like settle the godfathers? Settle the boys? And the godfathers is beyond there. It's even a huge cost that is not always talked about. Things like trade policies that sort of like, this protectionist policies that may favor certain amount of individuals that will be, responsible for importing certain things. All those deals happen at this time. You know what I mean? Which has like a very strong impact on, the economy generally. And sometimes I also ask myself, is it the culture of corruption as it is now that is also, leading to this high cost? Like, how do they, I feel like it's reinforcing. So to some extent, is it like because, Nigerians, we have a high level of corruption in Nigeria, so which is why all these things are linked in terms of like the cost of doing elections in Nigeria is linked to the fact that we're corrupt. And of course, when you go into power, because you have to kind of recoup the money spent, and then we have a vicious circle, because recouping means you're sharing the national cake, right? So rather than focusing on investment, for the public good, we're investing for the person, for our cronies and whoever possibly help them in there. And I think that's why it's very challenging. That I don't know how we're going to ever move forward in this sort of thing, because I've never seen, particularly this year's elections, is amazing how people have come out confidently to say that they can afford, 100 million. So I if it's other countries already, or where there's probably stronger institutions or whatever, I think questions will already be. I think already EFCC is even trying to follow up with some of this. Apparently I read something, I don't know how true it is, on Premium Times about EFCC wanted to investigate some of them for money laundering, because it's outrageous. So obviously it has a big implication. There's no doubt about it. Like different levels, from the cost of actually getting the forms, from the vote buying that happens, is all part of, and the fact that it actually now makes the campaigning culture about the money rather than the policies and the process. So we can't really hold them to account properly. We can't have a proper conversation, and things like that. So that is to my, to add to what Ekanem has spoke extensively on how this falls corruption, and how, like I said, it's I enter office and then I have to settle the godfathers, I have to settle the party, aides, the parties who have. And then I have to employ more people in the public service as well, job for the boys, because I have to have promised things. So it's vicious. And then we have people who are there not because they are there to necessarily serve the public or they have the right skills to serve the public, but because, it's all linked to this whole, campaign, culture we have in Nigeria.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Onyinye. And I think we've spoken a lot about the cost of the elections themselves and then the cost of the campaigns, but I'd like us to move towards vote buying, because vote buying is another reason why elections in Nigeria cost so much. So what do we think can be done to tackle vote buying in Nigeria, because that affects the everyday Nigerian?
Should I go?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think we've said it. Money is a predominant thing in our elections now, and everyone knows how the Nigerian economy is. Things are really dire, and so people are selling their mandates, their votes, really for 2 cups of rice, a small bag of salt, very basic commodities, and also. Even the modest amounts of money that you're hearing, you never really hear, because how many people can afford, when you think of our population and the spread, it's really modest amounts of money. And I think a lot of this is driven not only from economic situation, but also from voter apathy. People feel that governance doesn't have an impact. I think fundamentally, yes, we have laws in place against vote buying, and laws are hard to implement when things are widespread like this. And so we cannot legislate our way out of this problem. We have to, in some way, begin that civic conversation, making a link between selling your vote and insecurity and the bad roads. Until voters can make that link, we cannot really deal with vote buying. I know biometric technologies has tried to help with that, but what do you do with someone who's collected money and still goes to vote the person who really induced him or her to vote with the person? So this is one that I think, yes, we do have measures that we are looking, policy structure, but it's something that we really have to invest at the individual levels. And you have conversations with people at the grassroots. They will tell you, I would never see this person again, so let me guess what I will get. And it's, so there's that social contract between the state and the people is completely broken. And so it's, for me, it's civic education. People really have to make that link, and I think that is the one way to go to deal with this vote buying.
Yeah, thank you very much. Onyinye, please.
Yes, Ekanem, I totally agree with you. And as you know, that's one of the key things Step Up Nigeria currently works on. We work with children on that, that, and young people. And there's this initiative we are starting, the First Time Voters Initiative, which is targeting people, who are going to be voting for the first time during the election. So we're looking at people between, I think, 17 to 21 at this time, because people who were not necessarily of voting age, but they've passed voting age now, but and they've now met the voting age. And the idea, just like what Ekanem said, is the education. I think is very important.
Yeah.
The fact that people need to begin to understand, to be able to see election as a social contract. Like the only power that they have, to sort of like, get who they have in power. So, and I think there's a country, Uganda has done something around vote by, educating the citizens, the communities around vote by. What they are finding, and they did a randomized impact trial to actually see to what extent, civic education, changed, people's behaviors around vote buying. And they found that what it did was that in that community where they did, it didn't necessarily reduce, vote selling. Now, this is on the community side. So it didn't necessarily reduce people selling their votes. However, people took the money and voted who they wanted. You know what I mean? And so what they saw was that from the opposition, I think, at that particular election, they were doing that for, which they thought it was a positive thing. So what happened, that people actually still voted their conscience, if you know what I mean. And I think the the right party still won, if I could understand what that report was trying to say. Not the right party, but the party people voted for won. But it didn't necessarily reduce the levels of vote selling. And I think what they were trying to say in that particular trial or research was why it was that civic education helped quite a lot. So I think it's a starting point. And I think at some point, obviously, we might get to a point when people actually begin to reject, the selling their votes totally in addition to voting their conscience. So I think in places where people don't necessarily, because the thing with vote there in Nigeria now, Nigeria, we always go a step further to sort of make things a bit more difficult to challenging. When people even try to do that, sometimes you get thugs who intimidate you or whatever, stop you from still, like voting your conscience. But still, it's not in all areas, but we can make a start, because I think possibly, like you said, like Ekanem said, if people can have that link between seeing elections as a social contract, seeing it as the only tool they have to actually engage aspiring political, candidates, around the issues they face in the community, hold them to account and really reject. I remember Step Up Nigeria went to a community in Lagos, and after they watched Halima's vote, this is all part of our civic education program, the young people there, the lady, the community leader's child said, if this is, what vote buying, that she always sees this, they called him one name, I don't know whether it's Bongo or somebody, some man that comes to their village, during elections in that community in Lagos to sort of buy their votes. And he said, she said, with this, what she's going to do is going to arrange all the young boys in the village that this next election, they're going to say, you can't enter our village. You know what I mean? So I don't know how true she's going to implement that, but for us, that was the power, of just that, watching that film, getting the knowledge from Halima, in Halima's vote around the need to sort of, reject vote selling. So I think we need a very strong campaign on the need to reject vote selling, because there's a limit to which people can, if we can build that collective action, in various communities, around that, I think that it's going to be very difficult, if you know what I mean, for, how many people are they going to bribe, how many people are they going to intimidate, what I mean? So at some point we're going to get there. So I agree, and I feel we need to really change the norms, set new voting norms, we reject vote buying, that sort of thing. That is the new new election norms, that's really focused around electoral integrity and, linked to what, politicians are going to give us. Because when you're in other countries and you see, no country is perfect. Every country has their issues. But I remember years back, I'll never forget this event I had in Scotland, where we had to engage political office aspirants, around climate change issues. And it really struck me, like, I want Nigeria to get to that stage where the local residents, sat down, highlighting, they had their questions and really interrogating those, political party aspirants around, what are you going to do on XYZ? They have questions. That is the sort of, elections we want Nigeria to get to, where local communities can be, empowered, can be, to say, no, I'm not, don't, I'm not going to sell my vote. Tell me, these are the three things. You see, that school, that primary health care clean has not been working for a while. That blah, blah, that drainage is, is affecting us from, doing our trades. We're getting sick, blah, blah, blah. What are you going to do about it? Tell us, and how are we going to, ensure that you implement that? I think that's the sort of conversation. So I think if we can educate them on the power they have, and give them examples that it can happen. It's happening in other places where, electorates have, had that power to sort of hold their politicians to account. But we need to show them that example, that it can happen, that it's actually happened in XYZ and it can happen here. So I think that if we can do that, then we'll help to tackle some of the social norms that, possibly encourage vote selling, And of course, on the other side, everybody talks about this, but I'll just mention this because many civil society organizations, everybody keeps on talking about the need to reduce spending limits on elections. But, like Ekanem said, we have laws, we have policies, but implementation is always the thing. So we can always say these nice things, campaign finance reforms. I've seen that for many years on every electoral, reform strategy, but we're here today and nothing has happened. So that is why I agree with Ekanem. Civic education, I think, is the way to go. At the end of the day, change happens with the people. That's the simple truth, And the more Nigerians are a bit aware on how people only react when they know how things are going to, impact, the kind of how things impact on them, how things affect their lives. And I think the more we draw that connection, and that's where the role of civil society, and also, creating more platforms as well, between local people in the communities, and some political office aspirants, actually have proper conversations, around what they plan to do when they come into power. Let's have proper discussions. And I think that would also help as well, if, to try to at least reduce the incidence of of vote selling in communities.
Can I just add something? Because one thing that we said, I think your initiative of trying to work with youth on vote buying is quite important. You can't start early enough, really. Because if you look in Nigeria, this culture is deeply entrenched. If you look at school elections, just for positions, the kinds of fancy things they are coming up with, already this culture has trickled down. The promises that they make, unrealistic promises, estate elections, and you'll be wondering what's going on here. So that's now a prevailing culture for all kinds of elections in Nigeria. Someone shared on Twitter, and this was so impactful for me, that his son wasn't in secondary school, he was in primary school, was running for his class prefect, maybe the head of his class, and they were all asked to make a speech, and he asked his son, just as I said, go repeat your speech to me. And the boy had said all sorts of things, including promising them 3 air conditioners. I will buy you 3 air conditioners. I will do this in one class. They just have one space. And, so this little boy who is less than 10 has already imbibed that I have to induce people in a particular way. And so you see the deep cultural problem that we had. The man was agonizing. And you say, how did this boy learn this? So I really think that is a good initiative for this behavioral changes shift. We need to really start catching people very young. Even the conversations among voters is about, oh, this person gave me this, what are you bringing for me? When people are going for elections is when we expect them as voters to marry for us, pay all sorts of costs. You lose somebody. And so even the expectations from voters need to change, because those people will recoup all those monies when they go back into power.
Exactly. No, you're Ekanem, you're very right, and we can in fact overemphasize the importance of working with young people, which is the reason why we want to try, launch this initiative, I think next month, on the First Time Voters Initiative. And we want to try, we don't know, what I mean, how it's going to be, but we know that when the little we did with children, and it's important, it's good that you mentioned that. And I think I'll give this one example as well, like the flip side of what you just said. So why civic education is important. I've always told these stories in many conferences, but I'll say that again. When we went to the very first, I'll give the example of one of the very first few schools were engaged in 2018 on, the election was in 2019. And so we engaged this school in Wusetu, on the public school on vote by the first time we read Halima's vote. And this girl that was in that school, I think her name was Esther at the time. Then she was about 7, I think obviously she'll be about 10 now. She was one of the people that took part, and then we also had this song in the book. So that's why it's quite important how you also wanted to do civic education, but I think the use of stories. That's what we're finding. Because with Halima's vote actually also is more empowering. And so we had that story, and we had the song at the end of the book, which says, we no want your rice, we no want your money, wait till we want now, water way clean, And I think that also, so that resonated with the girl. And so when on election, just the week before the presidential election or something, she said the head teacher told us that there was this truck parked in front of their school, and Esther was amongst other kids playing, and she noticed that they were giving out Indomie, different things. So she ran to Mrs. Forgotten the woman's office, the head teachers, ran to her. She called her mommy, she calls her mommy, even though she's not her mom, but she's like, mommy, tell them to lock the gate, they are coming to buy our votes. And she was like, what are you talking about? Yes. And she was like, remember they told us in Halima's vote, your vote is your power, let them lock the gate, tell them to lock the gate. And she was taken aback, and she was like, where is this coming from? She said, from the book we read, Halima's vote, and I think that was one of the times Step Up Nigeria knew that we were onto something here, because we were going for this school engagement. We don't, you don't really know if it's, that was one of our first, success, feedback that we've had in terms of, I wouldn't have known that it came random. It's not like when it happened, she called us. It was like months after that she told us what happened when we were just having a chat. And she's like, oh, actually, this your book is having, and she said she was going to take the head teacher was going to actually take, because it's normal, they distribute what's on Indomie rice. But that when the girl said that she was taken aback, she didn't go out again, and that tells you that the power of young people. This is a 7-year-old girl who was able to influence her head teacher, who saw that this is what they've told us in that story. And that's why the importance of storytelling as well, as part of civic education is quite important. So you're right. It's something that we want to emphasize more. And I think one of the things I think I'm happy to also say here as well is that Step Up Nigeria has just we've just had the AFED. AFED is a low-cost association of low-cost schools in Nigeria. So that's made up of about 15,000. In fact, they said actually it's more than that, but conservatively, I would just say about 15,000 schools across 13 states, but they claim they're up to 24,000 now. So basically, we've now integrated anti-corruption into civic education in their scheme of work. We Step Up Nigeria help them to develop, which is going to be implemented from September 2022. And Halima's vote, which talks about vote buying, is actually part of the text we're going to use. And there's a lot of things around free and fair elections, vote buying. Vote buying is actually a topic, in that scheme of work. So I think it's little steps like that. We're excited because it's going to get us to almost 3 million conservatively, about 3 million children across Nigeria. Yes, because they're going to be teaching them, and as part of the regular subjects, it's part of civic education. So I think possibly with things like that, we hope, and we're going to monitor what impact this is having, that will also begin to raise that consciousness, in a more sustainable way beyond even Step Up Nigeria going to schools or NGOs going to schools. So that's one of the things as well that we are hoping would help to tackle these social norms that we have. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Oyin. I would like to digress a bit before I ask the final question, because this issue is also trending on social media, and I just thought, having experts here, let's also get your buying and opinion on this. We're talking about why elections cost so much, and we know that political parties are a major reason why, that's the mark, that's the cost that it was placed at. Political parties also fund vote buying in communities, and so there's been this rhetoric around how to change electoral corruption in Nigeria, we have to start from the political parties themselves. And a lot of people are saying the only way to do that is to actually join a political party and reform it from the inside. So I'd like to hear what your thoughts are in terms of, is political parties the way to, to reduce this corruption? And is joining the existing political parties the way, or do we create new parties? So what are your thoughts on that? I'd like to start with Oyin.
I think that's a tricky one, because I'm not really, I totally feel, I agree that they need to reform. We need to reform, the just like linked to what we've just talked about, the whole how parties operate, really. Like I said, a lot of corruption actually happens within the primaries that we don't even know. Like what I mean is, it's not publicly known unless if you know someone that is really there. So it's not, we only hear of the vote buying, the common vote buying, that the 2,000, but there's actually deeper deals that happen, within the party primary. So I totally agree that even reforming how the primaries, the party primaries work, I think, to be honest, I sort of see the point. If we're really going to change the system, you have to be in it. I think Dr. Obi Ezekwesili also said something like that, in the Fix Politics initiative that I'm part of. Some part of the things they're trying to do, get more Nigerians who, rather than all the maybe talking from outside, actually try to join to reform. I don't know about setting up new party system, but yes, I think that could be a starting point. Even I must tell you, is also very challenging, because people who, if you have integrity, and I'm still, I don't have the right, I would say that I can give you like a very confident answer in terms of like what the solution could be, but I think that is a good step to actually be in there. But you're right, to begin to see how you can, make the changes. So the more people with integrity who are trying to get in here, but then there's also the flip side, but getting in there to run for office, see the party nomination forms. So and that's my challenge. This is a vicious circle. You can't get, young people, but that's one of the issues with the cost of party nomination form, because it excludes lots of people.
A lot of people.
Yes, it does, because you have to then be either like a very, I don't know, and a Dangote or whatever, you know what I mean, to be able to. So that then it defeats the point. So, and who within that party is going to be formed? I think is the general mindset of Nigeria wanted to change this at some point. You know what I mean? And having people that maybe, I don't know, some people are, even, like I said, things are hard these days. I can't even think of, even if I have a credible candidate and say, let's all donate for this person to run for office. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of what practical, not, I don't want to be idealistic here. What's the practical thing? Okay, we have two candidates that we think we can support. Let's all rally and see. People do that, fundraise. So maybe try to do things a bit more legit, you know what I mean? Actually, and start planning for elections. See, election is next year in February. People are just getting the forms. What I mean is, we're still talking about people declaring and getting forms. In other places like this, that possibly would happen 3 years. You start your campaign, enough time, and that's enough time to fundraise. That's enough time. So you can actually fundraise for, political party aspirants or whatever, but you do it, there's a process, there's a system, and there's time. People start from one election, they start planning the next election. In Nigeria, we start like probably like 6 months to the election, because, we use lots of crooked means, right? So I think, to my mind, I think you're right. I think is to change things, we may have to start thinking of whether right now, to see how we can be in there as well, get more people who are, but then how do we get a credible person for a presidential, that hasn't soiled their hand in one way to get 100 million? I don't know. Maybe they start at lower levels where there's no, the eyes. That could be, someone has mentioned that before. Why not start maybe start with things like,
local government
House of
level.
Assembly or something, and maybe that way you start getting there, you're part of the party, and gradually you get, I don't know, that could be something. But it's something reflecting a bit more. Maybe probably hear what Ekanem has to say about that, whether people need to come to join the parties to fix it, or whether we can do that from outside. I don't.
Yeah, there's a popular saying that don't agonize, immobilize, and I think that would be my response to Twitter and this debate. The truth is, and let me take it from a related point, because the point you made about people just buying forms now. Governance stops once election comes. If people bought from 3 years ago, don't do anything else but campaign. Honestly, nothing is going to happen now till the next. Yes, I agree that INEC should be prepared for the next elections from the one. Yes, because of just the logistics of it. But for candidates, it is crazy season now. Nothing is happening now. Yeah. And I can't even imagine this torture for 2 years, 3 years, But yes, I think it's hard to change the system from outside. And my own reflection would be, who were the people on the table that thought it was okay to come to decision for 100 million? Not the decision itself. And so the voice of reasons there are isolated. We don't have enough people inside the political party to form a pressure group that can come up with reasonable decisions. Yes, we all agonize about these decisions that they make, but you really can't really change things from outside. So maybe we get enough people inside these political parties. You can't win an election in Nigeria. First of all, legally, we don't support independent candidates. Our laws don't support it. You have to be part of a political party. And also, you need the structure of a political parties. Elections are complex logistic challenge. Like it's really a complex operation. Without that structure, it's hard to even accessibility is a problem. Even in terms of some of the structures down to local levels, you actually would really need a party structure. But so we need to get people registered into the political and try to influence some of the decisions that they make. The fact that people came together and thought 100 million was okay shows you that we have the wrong people sitting on that table making decisions. So I think it's time for more people to get in. Not one person that gets in and we celebrate that person, but that person is going to be so isolated that it will be hard to make change. And that's what we see. We see people we celebrate from even civil society who go there really can't make a difference. I think we should have enough people entering the major political parties and forming like a pressure group within, and that's when we may see some kind of change.
True. I think I agree with you, Ekanem. Yeah.
I would agree as well. Thank you very
Nigeria
much.
Can be quite depressing to talk about. When you begin to talk about the issues, you just don't even know where to sort of like begin to, you know what I mean, what button to touch, because sometimes I don't get like.
You think last year was bad, and then the next day touches and you'll be like, incredible.
It's been crazy this year. Like this, I couldn't even believe it when it became like a joke. Like even everybody, and trust my good, what I love about Nigeria is no matter how bad the situation is, we always have that sense of humor. So I have seen everybody on Twitter now say, I hereby declare, and they're right, because it became like a joke. I've never seen this in my life, like where, like literally, even people that respect, like I don't even know who is serious, who is not serious. What's the agenda here? What's going on here? If you know what I mean. Like I've never seen that happen.
No, but there's also an angle about it being a form of illicit campaign finance, which makes sense. There's a cap to how much you can donate to a political party. I think it's about, if I remember, not more than 1 million. I can't remember. But so people say this is fundraising for the party. I've given you 100 million. Clearly, people who know they have no chance in the race, I've given the party 100 million. Everyone knows I've given 100 million. Because when you think about how much, it's incredible.
It is.
Cattle rearing group is buying 100 million for. No one is asking questions. No one is.
Rice
Even
farmers.
an unwilling candidate is ridiculous. So people are saying, well, just think about the money the party has raised.
True. I think there's an agenda. I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. Because it's just, it's surreal. I've never seen this, before.
Thank you very much. I think we'll end the podcast with some of your top recommendations. What can be done to reduce the cost of elections in Nigeria so that, seeing as it impacts corruption, how can we reduce the cost of elections? So Mr. Ekanem, please go first.
Okay, I think I will start with campaign financing. Let's look at our laws around campaign financing and the ones that need to be reviewed, but even enforcement of these laws. INEC has said over and over again they don't have the capacity to enforce these laws, and there's been on the table an electoral tribunal and commission. From the last elections, INEC has been able to prosecute only 1% of electoral offenders, and so there are no sanctions for this kind of behavior. Can we set and cap campaign finances? Can the right authorities, when people buy 100 million with no clear source of income, ask questions, the right question, what is your source of money? So that de-incentivizes people to spend that amount of money on elections. And also cap campaign spending. You see that it happens in the US, although people think of creative ways. I think that's one element of it. And when we think about also the real costs of elections in Nigeria, we should maybe think about how do we reduce the costs of elections like INEC. Let's start with our political parties. When we have 90-something political parties, although I hear many are being deregistered, when we are producing costs of election materials, you have to produce for the 90-something parties, and that drives up the cost. So can we benchmark? Yes, parties can register, but who are the parties that can take part in elections? That should also be the practical cost of elections. And look at things like even electoral materials that we're printing. We're spending so much, millions of dollars printing out. Can we secure these things in a way that is being done in Nigeria to drive down the cost? Just the practical costs for elections, because in a country that many people are going hungry, spending 305 billion on elections is not justifiable. Honestly, as a country, we have to ask ourselves tough questions around how money we're spending on elections. And also the candidates, there's also the society part of it. I think if people felt that there was some kind of social sanctions around illicit wealth, how you spend it, people are going to ask me questions. That would be a disincentive also, for people to come in and splash so much money around elections. So I think let's take it from the policy, structural, but also from the societal arm of it to actually drive down the cost of elections in Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you very much for your recommendations.
I agree with Ekanem. I think Ekanem has said, the core points. I would just add to the point Ekanem had made earlier too as well, around also encouraging more reform-minded people to join political parties, because she made a salient point that stuck with me. Someone group of people sat down to decide 100 million, was what we should have for presidential and 50 million for governor and so on. So I think it's time, like you're right. And I think that's one of the initiatives that Madam Obi is also trying to do with Fixed Politics Initiative, is to sort of like get the right help build, people with the right mindset and, train them or whatever, because they have the School of Politics and Governance, the SPPG, which is actually geared around that. So prepare people, who want to go into public office so that they go there with integrity. They go there to prioritize public good over personal gain and stuff. I think if we have more of those people in parties, in political parties actually running for office, then that would also begin to help people think, reform some of these political parties from within. And also agree with the society part. I think we need to, because that social norms is a very strong thing. It's a very powerful tool. And how we can use it positively, I think, is the thing. How can we change the narrative? How can we begin to, change that norm, where people are like not excited over the, the money changing hands, but more excited about clear policies, clear guide, what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, not just talking, and also being able to follow through once you come into power, that sort of thing. How can we change, like I said, that electoral contract? How can we strengthen? We need to strengthen the electoral contract between, the political officer, political aspirants and the citizens. And then I think I would also add, I still think there is a role for Code of Conduct Bureau here, because I was reflecting this morning. This asset, like I just kept on saying, someone, some people, they said somebody bought the form. Okay, let's start investing. Even the person that bought the form or the groups that bought the forms for certain people, let's sort of have some sort of I don't know what is, I can't say whether there's anything on elections and assets tracing or whatever within CCB at the moment. But I know that CCB has that law in terms of particularly for those people who are already in public office. So there were certain people already, we know there are about 10 ministers or whatever who have declared, there's also sitting governors that have declared interest for presidential races. Where does CCB come in here in terms of what those people declared? Can we use that as well as a tool, if you know what I mean, to sort of just ask questions, raise dust. I think we, ruffle people a little bit so that it's not just so easy to say you're somebody, they bought form for you. We will have to be, there has to be some sort of, I think people declare, using the asset declaration as a tool as well to sort of checkmate some of these practices. Because I was reflecting, I can't really tell you exactly how that is going to, but I'm thinking that there's something that can be done there, because if the governor if they really declare their assets when they came into power, we know Ekanem had mentioned what the salary and all that, even for the high, what it could be, right?
Yeah.
And now you're about to run for office. You should be able to, and if they were doing the asset declaration process, effectively in terms of, I don't know, I think you do it when you first join office and we're about to leave. By now, they should have been, people should be filling the asset declaration form to see what they got and be able to justify how they got where they are. And then if whatever they have completed at the end doesn't tally with even just buying the 100 million, then we have to also begin to ask, how did your salary say? So tell us what other income, how come you're able to raise other income when you're not allowed to? You know what I mean? Then just raising that dust and also publicizing it as well, making it a thing, I think would also be a way, to whatever. Like Ekanem said, we have many laws, many policies, to be honest, to be able to checkmate something, but we don't just use it well. I really believe I'm a big fan of the asset declaration thing, but we just don't use it because it's a big tool to check lifestyle, of people in public office, but we don't use it enough. And I think I would recommend that it's something that we should start thinking of how we can use that as well to avoid these sort of situations of public office holders, particularly like a CBN governor, for example, for crying out loud, saying farmers, want to know these farmers. I didn't know my farmers could be that rich. So it's all those sort of things. Let's use that asset declaration tool, as well to monitor, to checkmate this sort of election cost in Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much to my guests. Thank you, Mrs. O. Thank you, Ekanem. Thank you for your time. I think we've had a very robust and interesting conversation. Just to highlight again for our listeners, today we've discussed how the cost of elections fuel corruption. And some of the recommendations that we've run through today is the importance of civic education, importance of civic participation by Nigerians so that we can reform the structures from the inside. We've also discussed the importance of strengthening the social contract between politicians and the people, and why we need to enforce legislation. Just to add, we think about how the constitution in Nigeria is clear about who can run for public office, and people like ministers who know that it's illegal still went ahead to declare, and then the president now had to release a statement to say those who are running have to. It's a brazen abuse of the rule of law, and it's why the importance of strengthening the laws is very, very important if we hope to bring about any change. So we hope that our listeners would have gotten some new voting norms by listening and be encouraged, to act with integrity in the coming elections and just to herald and protect their votes. So we encourage everybody to vote in the coming elections and to play their role in building the Nigeria that we all desire. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you for having
us. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation about how the cost of elections fuels corruption in Nigeria. Remember that you can be the change. Change happens with people, and be a part of the people with integrity that are trying to change the way things are done in Nigeria. Please do not forget to follow us on social media. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at step_up_Nigeria, and follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn at Step Up Nigeria. On YouTube, you can also follow us at Step Up TV. Subscribe to our channel, and our podcast is Step Up Nigeria Podcast on all podcasting platforms. To find out more about the work that we do, please visit our website at stepupnigeria.org. Our guests for this podcast were Onyinye and Ekanem Bassey. Please follow them on social media as well. Thank you so much for your time and for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Until the next one, goodbye.